This is a very basic Mishnah, which is also used in many contexts. Some of the contexts are, I would say, used sometimes in arguments for different issues, and maybe we can get into an understanding of a certain aspect of how a person should lead his life in Jewish context. Oh no, sorry. Here. So this is, I would say, in a way, a meta mishnah, a mishnah about what is it, what should be our intentions when we are studying Torah, and what should our study of Torah lead us to. And we'll just, does anybody want to read the English translation of the Mishnah? Okay, I will read it. Rabbi Ishmael, his son, we're talking about the son of Rabbi Levitas, said, "He who learns in order to teach, it is granted to him to study and to teach. But he who learns in order to practice is granted to him to learn and to teach and to practice." Rabbi Tzadok said, "Do not make them a crown for self-exaltation, nor a spade with which to dig." And so too Hillel used to say, "And he that puts the crown to his own use shall perish." Thus you have learned that anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of the Torah removes his life from the world. I'm sorry, more people are getting in. So let's look at this Mishnah, and I think it's clearly two parts. It has two parts. So let's start with the first one. He who learns in order to teach, it is granted to him to study and to teach. But he who learns in order to practice, it is granted to him to learn and to teach and to practice. What do you understand? What is the difference between first of all, why a person who learns how to teach, who learns Torah in order to teach, what is that about, and what is learning in order to practice? How do you understand this? Yes, please, Paula.
Oh, for me, it's like not just in Torah. I think it's in almost everything. If you just read something to learn, but if you don't do it, so it's really difficult to teach after. For example, if I have students in my work, and if when I need to teach them, I of course it's something that I need to practice too. I need to do it, because otherwise, how can I teach them? Do you understand what I mean? It's like it's very difficult to teach something that you don't practice, because how can you know well if you are not doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? It's like if I'm doing things, then I will understand what is difficult and what is not difficult, and how I supposed to, and what when I'm doing things, then I learn like from my own mistakes, and I can go deep more, but otherwise it's like it's just like empty words.
Mm-hmm. So you're taking it, I think, if I may say so, you're taking it to a kind of a psychological truth to it, right? This is how things work. The way you study better if you want to teach it, right? And you study even better if you were trying to practice it. So it's basically if I take your answer a bit to the extreme, it's a tip, a learning tip. If
Yeah,
I
but
want to learn very well, I should try to learn in order to practice. If I want to learn well but not that well, I should learn in order to teach.
but
Something
not
like that.
psychological. Why do you say psychology? Why do you say psychological?
I'm saying it's a tip. It sounds the way that you're explaining it. It's a tip for learning. It's a human tip of how a person learns well.
And
It's not in the realm of values. It's in the realm of human behavior.
yes and no. But even when you are, how can you? It's like when you are going to teach something, then you need to do that thing, because doesn't, if I tell to my student you're supposed to do this and this, and I'm not doing, I say, or sometimes we have a, sometimes happen that we say to the student, okay, this is the suppose that you are supposed to do, but we are not doing that way, we are doing this way. So, and it's like how we are, it's like they are not really convinced when we are saying, okay, this is what it's supposed to be, but we are not doing this, we are doing it another way. So
Mm.
it's like, yeah, you should live the way you are teaching, otherwise it doesn't, it's empty.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So now you're giving us an aspect that is more towards the values. If you teach, then teach in order to act, in order to practice, because that's the best way to teach. Because that way your students will also learn from you. I just want to point out that it seems to me, at least from the Mishnah, that the subject is yourself, right? In other words, uh, the 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 um, the title is, what should someone who learns Torah, in what way should he learn? It's not a directive to a teacher, it's a directive to a learner, right? So I'm just saying, I think that what you say works in the Mishnah, but it I think in a way it takes the title from what it seems to be the simple understanding of what the Mishnah says. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know, I just think that
I
is,
see here a big group of Tatiana Homchik. Hello, everybody. I don't know who here wanted to speak, but please speak up.
I wanted to speak. Good evening. The thought that I had on it is that essentially what it points out to me, it's that or what I think about it is that blessing comes from performance or from enactment. We study Torah to learn about mitzvot, and we study the scriptures in order to have this kind of like guidebook for, well, life, and how to sort of like act. And you can only fully and truly understand that if you actually live by it and if you perform it. Otherwise you're not going to be able to pass that knowledge on, because like at the end of the day, what is it to know about something and how it's done without doing it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the blessing from the mitzvot only comes from their performance.
So you're saying it's in a way it's a Mishnah that talks about what we gain from different kinds of learning. You should know that if you're learning in order to act, then you get also the action and also the study and the teaching.
And yeah, and I think it's another in this kind of context that like it keeps the Torah alive as a book, because it only is going to continue as a living sort of like piece of our culture if we do perform and do act.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just scripture.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to say something about this? Okay, so let me ask a question. What if I want to act? I'm learning in order to act, which I think is probably the truth for most of those who are sitting here. Learns to order in order to practice, but we are not so interested in teaching. What is the point of this second part of saying whoever learns in order to practice, it is granted to him to learn and to teach and to practice? I don't want to teach, I want to learn and to practice. Now, that's what I've learned for. I've learned in order to practice. Yes, the group of home chick.
I just mean like we would also like to pass this knowledge on to our children, of course. So for us to make it able to stay alive, we have to practice it to learn to our children as well, so they can keep it alive for the coming generations.
Inevitably you pass on, yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're part of a community. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you in principle. I'm just wondering with the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says I'm learning in order to practice, that's what the situation is. A person sits and he wants to practice. So I'm now reading the laws of Shabbat, okay? Because I want to practice it. Where does the teaching come from? I don't want to teach. I want just to be to practice. I want to know how to keep Shabbat like I should. If I have children, maybe I'm also interested in teaching them, but that has nothing to do with the situation that the Mishnah presents for me here. So what is the idea of the Mishnah if I'm like the Mishnah could say like this? The Mishnah could say the person who learns in order to teach, it's helped for him, it is granted for him to study and to teach. If he learns in order to practice, it is granted for him to learn and to practice. Why is the teaching brought in also in the second part?
But isn't it through the practice of such, you do lead by example, so inevitably people will look further into it as well. If you're the only person in the community keeping Shabbat because you learned about this, someone else will see it and inform himself to do the same. So inevitably you're passing on, even though you're not directly teaching.
Mm-hmm. So what I understand from your answer is that it's in a way it's not even the Mishnah is not teaching us a value, but it's giving us a picture of reality. When you study in order to learn, you should know that you get the force to study, and if you study in order to teach, you should know that you are granted the power also to study and also to teach. If you are learning in order to practice, you should know that this intention grants you, by definition, also to study and also to teach and also to act, because there's no action without teaching. That becomes a deep understanding, I think. Does anybody have another something they want to bring into the discussion, another understanding or another answer?
I'm thinking of that if you are practicing things, you just do it and you are not thinking in a way. But when you're doing it more, you will suddenly have the aim to learn and understand. And then you can teach too at the same time.
I'm not sure I understood exactly what you
Yes,
said.
you are practicing things, but you don't understand. But when you're practicing, you get more and more interested in it, so you are getting more knowledge, and then you can teach and practice too,
I see.
in a more way that is you have thought about it, what it is you are doing.
Yes. So thank you, Cecilia. Any other thoughts, things that you would like to share? Yes, please.
Hey, just a question, because since we learned before that one has the responsibility to rebuke as well. So if you learned and you practice and you have this duty of rebuking someone, is that not a form of teaching as well?
Again, what is the form of teaching? If you
rebuke someone because you see them not performing or doing something, something wrong, is that not then by itself a form of teaching?
Well, it's a very sensitive thing, as we learned, to rebuke, right? So
Actually,
I guess that there are different forms of teaching, and that there are positive ways to teach and negative ways to teach, and maybe
even
there are
though
ways that we think are teaching but actually are not teaching, but the opposite.
exactly, even though your intention is not to be a teacher, at the end you still learn.
Yes, so here I think yes, that was brought up already, and I think that you are making it even more sharp, that really it's inevitable. If you are learning and you are practicing, by definition you are teaching also. Benny Moalem, you wanted to say something too.
I think Eric was really spot on from my point of view on a lot of it. But I also wanted to add that a lot of people, they learn better by practicing. It gets programmed better by practicing it instead of just reading it out loud. Myself, I learn by doing. I have to be hands-on, and if I don't practice, if I practice, then I also kind of teach myself on the go by doing it in person compared to reading a book. I might have a short-term memory, if people will say that, but I just do things better if I do it in person, and by doing that, I'm teaching myself by practicing, basically.
I don't think it's any problem of yourself. I think you're pointing out a very human way of learning. Theory is always different than practice. And if we think we know something in theory, but we're not practicing it, for sure we don't have everything we know about it. So I absolutely agree with you. Paula.
I was just thinking about your question before, that sometimes what happens if we do things, but we are not thinking that we want to teach someone, but things that very much like in there are some roles, especially like a rabbi or maybe a rabbinate or things like that, that even if you don't want to teach, you are a role model. So we are even if you are not saying anything, we are still learning of things that you are not saying. So like the way you act, like the way you react. So a role model can teach even if he doesn't want to teach. So for example, if I have at work colleagues that have been working like 30 years in my work, and of course, even if when they are working, sometimes they don't teach me anything, but I still I'm learning from them, just watching how they do things. So they are models. So it's like, so it's very important how they do, how they behave in front of the other people.
Yes. Yes, thank you. I think it's very important, and in a way, Judaism teaches us that any of us are role models to someone, and this is, I think, also what Eric and the group there said. But it's also, I think, if we know, for instance, the laws of Marit Ain on Shabbat, what seems like we are doing, and how serious they are, things that we may do perfectly right, but it seems like we're doing wrong, are forbidden on Shabbat, because someone may see us and think that this is allowed on Shabbat. Even if we're doing everything right, it's still forbidden because it matters those who are around us. And if they know that we are Jewish, and we practice halakha, then we shouldn't do anything that seems wrong, even if we know it's right. So I think that this idea that all of us are role models, and it's also connected to what we read a few weeks ago in Pirkei Avot, that we should know that there is an open eye somewhere, right? Ain ro'ah ve'ozen shomat v'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim. That an eye sees and an ear hears, and all your actions are written in a book, right? We read it a few weeks ago, already a few months ago in Pirkei Avot. I think it's in the second chapter, which is basically that also, right? What we do is written somewhere. It has an effect. Maybe it has an effect on others. Maybe it has an effect on the fact that it happened in the world. And so we should be aware of that. Daniel Yodit, that's your name?
Yes, Daniel Jordan. Yeah. So I think
Yes.
maybe you already said some of the things that I thought about, that maybe the Mishnah is trying to tell us that what we want to learn must be something that we can teach. So it has to be something good, and something that can be open. And what we want to learn to practice must also be something that we can teach, that we feel we can teach to other people. So it must be something good.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be open, and it can't be a secret, or we can't keep it to ourselves.
That's beautiful. I was naturally thinking that the Mishnah, when it says halomed, when someone learns, it talks about Torah. But you're saying I can interpret it differently. Maybe it's any kind of study. And when you're in a mindset that you're studying something in order to teach or in order to practice, then you know also what you should study that is a positive thing and something that is worth teaching and worth doing, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting interpretation. Thank you. I didn't think about it that way. I must say that in the pshat, in the simple understanding, that when the sages would say someone who learns, I think they will refer to Torah study, which is the ultimate studying. But it doesn't take from your interpretation that can take the Mishnah to many other directions. So thank you very much. Anyone else would like to add something to the discussion? Okay, so I will just add a bit. Again, it won't be anything very new, but just a little of my flavor of understanding to it. I think it's interesting that the subject of the sentence is the one who studies Torah. In other words, in my understanding, it's not the target. The Mishnah is not talking about the target. He's not saying you should learn in order to teach, or you should learn in order. Sorry, the Mishnah doesn't say you should want to teach or you should want to practice. The question is, how are you meeting the text? How are you learning? The very action of learning. If I'm learning in order to know, this is one type of learning. I'm learning in a certain way. I'm learning in a whole different way when I know I need to teach this. It's to my benefit. It's not, the Mishnah is not trying to create necessarily teachers or to create people who act. The Mishnah is trying to give us a mindset of how should we learn, or even I would say even in a more extreme way, to show us there are different ways of studying, and to explain to us that when we meet a text, a Torah text, a text of a holy nature, we have to bear in mind, how am I studying it? Not what will be the result of it, but these very words could be understood differently, or could be accessed differently, if I'm learning them in order to know, if I'm learning them in order to teach, and if I'm learning them in order to act. And actually, this was a discussion between the sages, not regarding this Mishnah, but there are two major paths of learning that are already appearing in the times of the sages and later on in the Talmud. One is, I'm learning the Torah in order to know what to do. And this led to Jewish halakha, right? I'm studying the Torah in the mindset of, what is God asking me to do? And all my reading of the Torah is concentrated around that. And so when you learn the Talmud, you see that those who study the Torah in this way are trying to see if there's an extra letter of Vav somewhere. It means that there's a halakha deriving from it. It means that there's something that was added that I need to understand a new halakha over it. And if there is a certain way that the pasuk is written and it's not written in a different way, it means that there's a halakha concerning it. There's an action that I need to understand from it. My mindset of learning Torah is a mindset of action. It's a mindset that tries to figure out how the Torah brings me to action, brings me to practice. Another whole way of thought, whole line of thought, was to try and learn the text regardless of action, just to understand what is the text about, and to derive from it not halachot, not orders and directives of practice, but to understand what did God say here? What is the Torah telling me? And in the stages, you can see that it would be the two lines of Midrashei Halacha and Midrashei Agada. The Midrash is the Hebrew word for explaining the text, for giving an understanding of the text. A Midrash of Halacha is explaining the text according to Halacha, deriving halachot from it. Midrash Agada is to give me the story behind the text, to give me a context, to give me to show depth of a text, regardless of what the practical action should be. And from the sages, we have it throughout all the ages. People who their learning is constructed more over action, over practice, and they learn in a certain way. When they read a piece of Talmud, they try to understand, what am I supposed to do, and are there different opinions to what we're supposed to do, and how should we rule down in the end? And there are people who will study anything with the question, what does it teach me? What does it show about values? What does it show about how the sages understood the world, understood God, understood holiness, understood the story of the Torah, or the story of the Talmud, or the mindset of the rabbis and the sages before us. And of course, one can't happen without the other. But this is just something that I wanted to add to this Mishnah, which is when you come before a text, and here we are in a Beit Midrash. A Beit Midrash is by definition a place where live learning is occurring. This is a Mishnah for people who attend the Beit Midrash. When you're approaching a text, how are you approaching it? And if you're approaching it for the intention of teaching it, then you will study it in a certain way. And so you are granted also to study and also to teach. You will be able to teach after you study it, because that's the mindset of the way that you're approaching the text. And if you are learning in order to practice, in other words, your approach to the text is an approach of practice. That's the way that you're approaching the text, is to understand, what should I do? Then you are granted the very approach to the text will enable you both to learn. You're coming before the text and you're learning it, also to teach, and also to practice, also to keep. And obviously, the Mishnah also offers some kind of a hierarchy. It seems, at least, like, to me at least, maybe someone disagrees, that the second is presented as greater than the first. So this is a judgmental approach, right? That the Mishnah itself says you should try to approach a text for the intention of action, intention of practice. This will give you also the ability to learn and also the ability to teach and to do. Rather, when you approach it in order to teach, not necessarily you will manage also to keep, because you're learning it, but you don't know really what you're doing. You're learning it as a theory, as a story. You're not learning it as something that requires something from you, that demands something from you. And I will just say, before we get to the second part of the Mishnah, that this is also a great message of Judaism. And I say it to different people I meet many times, that Judaism is a very, very practical religion. We're not talking so much about your belief. You're allowed to believe many different things. We don't have many dogmas, many things that are principles of belief. The Rambam tried to construct 13 principles of faith, of belief, which we should all know, but he was immediately challenged. And different rabbis said, no, we don't have to believe that. We don't have to believe that. We have sources that show that we believe the opposite. And he was immediately challenged when he wrote the 13 principles of faith. And nowadays, I think most of his principles are pretty well accepted, but in principle, if we're talking about principles of faith, so I think our biggest principle is that we can't really have a principle of faith. Jews can be believing Jews and law-abiding Jews while believing very, very different things. But the practice is very, very important. With practice, we're not playing games, and we can fight over practice. We can also, there are groups in Judaism who went out of Judaism because the practice was different. I'm not sure if we will have any example of a group that went out of Judaism only because of difference in faith. But once it became a difference in action, then sometimes it led to a separation. And so I think this Mishnah also tells us something about the values of theoretical study and study of principles, of values, of thought, or what we call today Jewish thought, as opposed to Jewish action. Many of us, I think, or at least I will say to myself, I am sometimes naturally more drawn to ideas, to theories, to spiritual concepts, to learning Torah as a spiritual experience, as an experience of beliefs, of values. And the Mishnah tries to ground us and to say, yeah, that's great, but what's even greater is to study in order to practice, in order to get into action. And by the way, I will just say that in that sense, the Mishnah is actually a bit against what might be the natural understanding, right? Someone would say the very basis is to practice, right? Then someone who's not only practicing, but he's also willing to teach, he is a greater person, right? There are fewer teachers than people who just act, who just practice Judaism. Jewish teachers of Judaism, there are less. It requires more expertise. And the Mishnah somehow builds the value the opposite, right? To study in order to teach is great, but to study in order to act, in order to practice personally, is even greater, because it holds within it also the teaching, but it doesn't stay there. Anyone wants to comment, to share a thought before we go to the second part of the Mishnah? Okay, so let's move on to Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Tzadok said, "Do not make them a crown." Them, I think the simple understanding is the Torah, the words of Torah. Don't make them a crown for self-exaltation, nor a spade with which to dig. And so too Hillel used to say, and he that puts the crown to his own use shall perish. Thus you have learned, anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of Torah removes his life from the world. How do you understand that? Let's try to understand this part first, and then try to talk about the connection between the first part and the second part. Let's maybe I will ask a more direct question. What do you say about the two what's the word? The two descriptions here. A crown for self-exaltation and a spade with which to dig. What is it in real life? What is it referring to, and what would be the difference between a crown and a spade? Yes, Paula.
For me, this is the first part, that is not to make them a crown for self-exaltation. It's like a teacher needs to be a kind of a humble, because it's not good like to be very, like, I know this, and because he's not going to be able to pass the teaching. It's like he's not going to be a good teacher for his student if he's very. So then if you are going to teach, then you need to be humble, and then you need to be like a guide, not I'm the one who knows everything. This is, and the other one is like, yeah, you don't need to use the spade, that you don't need to make them feel bad, or you don't need, so you don't need to make them feel maybe bad because they are not, to be very, I don't know, like very soft, like to be very human values, it's like not to make the other people feel bad because they don't know or something like that. This is what I understand.
So if I understand you correctly, the crown is not to make yourself proud, and the spade is not to use it for bad uses.
not too bad uses, like make them feel like how can I explain? It's like when you like to punish, like you are not doing good, and then like be like a kind of punishment, like to be very soft, because otherwise it's very difficult for the one that needs to learn to open and then to try again and again.
Okay, thank you. Any other ideas? I see that Daniel Jordan says the crown points up to heaven, the spade points down to earth. Yeah, I like this. I like this, but you need to explain more. What do you think it means? Because you stayed in the image. What do you think it means about studying Torah? What is the pointing up to heaven, and what is the pointing down to earth? And why shouldn't we do that? Why shouldn't we point by learning Torah to the heaven or point down to the earth?
Yeah, I think I wrote it and I thought it too fast, but now I think it's what you learn. And when we're talking about Torah, when you learn something that is good and gives you strength, you should be careful and not so it makes you too big, too powerful, and be more humble. And don't think that you are something up in the sky, or as if you were a god, something that other people can't be. But also be careful not to learn something that can make you depressed, maybe, that you can't understand, that puts you down to the earth. And don't dig yourself down to the earth and be alone, or knowledge is something we should be careful about, especially Torah, I think.
Why I understand why Torah would make us proud, but why would it make us depressed? Why do we need to be careful of that?
I think some parts of the Torah is something we should not learn alone, but we need, I know where I heard it, but Timtza lecha rav, taseh lecha rav.
Yes, that's in Pirkei Avot also, in the first chapter, yes.
Yeah. So some parts probably we need more people, we need a community to learn together. And if you don't have something that knows better than you, then one should be careful.
Very interesting. That you're reading it as a way of directing the learning to community.
Yeah. Also, there can be more like the profane, the material.
So it warns on one hand from being too proud to study with others, and in the other way to what happens if you learn alone is that you could become depressed, or somehow it will affect you in a bad way.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. Yes, Homchik group.
So your intention in learning or in teaching should not be for personal gain, or like even more so from like material benefit, self-benefit, or be used as a weapon to bury literally
to put yourself upon others, to wear it as a crown. So essentially sort of as a thing that you utilize to put yourself visibly in a better place, or in a place above others, I think. So
this is the crown.
Yeah, and then sort of worldly benefits, sort of doing this for the idea of monetary gain also sort of comes against the way of Torah.
So one is spiritual gain, pride, and one is monetary gain. Somehow to use it as, if I'm digging, it's like I'm maybe I'm digging gold or digging something else.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's thank you. Okay. Yes. Tuli.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I was thinking about the spade. Like when you dig, you sort of want to cover things up, and you want to sort of hide things, I suppose. So could it be that the meaning would be that if you learn something, you shouldn't hide what you've learned. You should aim to sort of learn and to practice, and therefore be, hey, the light to the world. And it's you shouldn't be learning in order to hide what you've learned. Could that be some kind of a meaning?
Definitely could. Definitely could. So you're saying the same way that a spade is used to cover, you shouldn't. But then maybe the problem is that making the Torah the spade. I like, yeah. So you're saying when you're making the Torah the spade, in a way, you're making the words of Torah something that you're embarrassed by. You're not proud of what you study.
Well, in the same sense that if it's, if you make it to make, like if you use it as a crown for self-importance, okay, in the same way, you should not be hiding. You shouldn't be embarrassed of what you're learning either. It's like the two opposites in a way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we can move on to the last part of the Mishnah, and thus, yeah.
One thing to it, because we've had a kind of interesting discussion on this spade.
You mean that you have a secret discussion while being in the Beit Midrash?
Yes, absolutely. I think
I don't know if it's exactly what we wanted to happen in the Beit Midrash, or it's exactly the opposite of what we wanted to happen in the Beit Midrash.
But the result we always share, so it benefits
everyone.
I think the word spade really sticks out, and what I thought there was like making Torah a worldly tool, a tool of doing worldly things with, is the issue here. It's not meant to be that. So
okay.
that was it. Yeah.
It's the intention of that is. What is your intention in performing?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is your intention in using the words of the Torah?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And I think what you're saying is leading up exactly to the last part. So Hillel used to say, and he who puts the crown to his own shall perish. So in other words, the Mishnah at least makes a distinction between, or makes a connection between the words of Rabbi Tzadok and the words of Hillel, was obviously earlier from him, and we actually learned those words of Hillel on the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. If you remember, it's I don't remember if there are two or more, but there are very few cases in Pirkei Avot, and generally that Mishnah quotes itself. It's very interesting. It's very unique. But in any way, Hillel says the one who uses the crown, or puts the crown to his own use, shall perish. So that exemplifies what you guys said just now, right? You're making the words of Torah a crown, but you're making the words of Torah a crown that you are using, that you're taking to your own use, right? So Rabbi Tzadok says the crown is to make yourself bigger, to make yourself what's the translation here? Self exaltation, to exalt yourself. Hillel might say, even in a simpler way, to use it, right? It's a crown now that I can use. How can I use it? I can use it to gain more appreciation. I can use it to have an authority on someone by making the words of Torah a crown. If it's only a crown, it's fine. And actually, we read in Pirkei Avot a few weeks ago that there is such a thing as the crown of Torah, right? The crown of Torah is a good crown. We said there's a crown of Torah and a crown of other things, and the crown of good name is better than all of them. So a Torah could become a crown, and it's a positive thing that the Torah will become a crown, but you can't use the crown. You can't use it for self-exaltation or for worldly, for my own use. And then, so those were two quotes, one of Rabbi Tzadok and one of Hillel. But then the Mishnah itself speaks. Right? Now it's not a quote, it's the Mishnah itself. Thus you have learned who says that. Not Rabbi Tzadok and not Hillel, but the Mishnah itself says it, right? So we like to say it's either the Mishnah, or we know who gathered the Mishnah together was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And the last generation of the sages who gathered the Mishnah and edited it and made it into canonized it, made it into a ordered book. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, or the Mishnah itself says, thus you have learned, anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of Torah removes his life from the world. Which is basically, I think, what all of you said in different ways, right? And we can understand if this is the underline of the Mishnah, then maybe we can't know exactly what Rabbi Tzadok meant and what Hillel meant, but we can understand that the Mishnah understood Rabbi Tzadok's words as examples of ways of deriving worldly benefits from the words of Torah. And here I think that all what you said is true, right? Or almost all what you said. There are some who talked about depression. I think is maybe less of that. It's still a relevant interpretation of what Rabbi Tzadok says, but maybe it's not what the Mishnah is trying to. The Mishnah itself is trying to say by bringing up Rabbi Tzadok. But most of the answers were exactly that. And we can have many discussions about what is the crown and what is the spade. And we have 5 last minutes. Tuli, do you want to say something?
No, sorry, I
Okay.
just forgot to lower the hand.
Okay, no problem. I would like just to say one last thing, and then maybe we'll have a minute for questions or for other ideas about the connection between the first part and the second part of the Mishnah. If the conclusion of the Mishnah is anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of Torah removes his life from the world, that's the conclusion of Rabbi Tzadok and Hillel. What does it say about the first part of the Mishnah? Maybe what it's, I'm not going to open it for a discussion because we have 4 minutes, but I will just say maybe what it means, and that is only a maybe. Maybe it's not what the Mishnah says, but I'm offering now an understanding that the Mishnah thinks that if you are not learning in order to practice, or in order to teach, then you are using the Torah. Inevitably, you will get to use the Torah for your own benefits. In other words, if I'm saying I want to learn only to learn, like we said in the beginning, I offered that as an option. I asked why isn't that an option in the Mishnah? Maybe the Mishnah is trying to say if someone says I am learning only to learn, not to do, not to practice, and not to teach, I just want to know what's there. Inevitably, this way of learning leads to self-exaltation or to any kind of deriving worldly benefits from the Torah, even if it's honor, even if it's the knowledge that pride, the knowledge that I know something. In a world that is making such a big deal of knowledge, pure knowledge. And maybe this generation, maybe we lack this, but in previous generations, how much do I know? How much philosophy I know? How much of a complicated mind I have? How much knowledge did I acquire? And the Mishnah is trying to say, we're not going by that. It's great to know a lot of things. It's great to know Torah, but our intention should be either to practice or to teach. Studying for the sake of studying alone will lead us inevitably to deriving worldly benefits from those words of Torah. Now, I want to underline, because it's a Beit Midrash and we're learning texts and we're trying to learn how to learn, this is not a must. We don't have to understand it from the Mishnah. We could also understand that you can learn for your own self, for your own benefit, and that's positive. And you can learn in order to teach, and you can learn in order to practice. You just shouldn't learn and make the Torah a crown or a spade. We can understand that from the text also, and that would be less judgmental. We are allowed to, if that is the right understanding, then we can also just learn in order to learn, just to acquire knowledge is also good. But I wanted to offer through the context, the way that the Mishnah was built, the way that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi constructed the Mishnah, that there is a stronger connection between the first and the second part, and to try and tie them together, and to pass this, and with that passing this message that really ultimately there can't be such a thing as learning just in order to learn. That will almost inevitably lead us to the wrong kind of learning, which will result in deriving worldly benefits from the world of Torah, from the words of Torah. If the time is 9:30, so 8:30, so we can finish here. If anyone has questions or comments, feel free to share. And if not, have a great evening, and we'll hope to see you soon.
לילה טוב.
תודה רבה.
Thank you.
לילה טוב, חודש טוב, שבוע טוב.
חודש טוב.